How do we keep the planet moving towards a greener future? It doesn't happen without driven entrepreneurs and inspired social impact leaders like you. This podcast will give the tools and insight you need to join the sustainability movement and save the world. This is Thinking Green with Mohammed Abdallah.
Welcome back, Thinking Green Nation. Today, I am joined by a dear friend and colleague, Ricky. How are you doing this afternoon, Ricky?
I'm doing good, Mo. How about yourself? I hear you're at a conference.
I am, man. I had to break aside. I couldn't let my Thinking Green audience down and myself either, right? I got to stay consistent, and I'm enjoying this whole podcast thing. But you've been doing this podcasting thing for a while now. How did you get into it?
Yeah, it's kind of a bizarre story. A friend of mine and I decided to do videos on kind of woodworking and DIY projects, actually. But what we realized is just with how busy we were, there was no way we could make content like on a weekly basis. Like, how many chairs could I make in a week or a month? I mean, it just wasn't sustainable. So we started to kind of bridge out to other things. And eventually I made a video about solar panels, and it didn't do well at first. It took, I think, about 7 months. So for 7 months, it did nothing. It had like 800,000 views, something like that. And then all of a sudden, I think we tweaked a tag or two or a title or something, and YouTube just started showing it, and the video just took off. We got more views in a day from that video than our entire channel's life history, kind of thing, on a day-by-day basis. So it kind of showed us maybe we should talk about renewable energy and sustainability and solar, because people do care. You'll get the detractors as well. There are people who watch these videos just to like poo-poo on solar for whatever reason. But I try to get back to people on comments and stuff. And that's kind of how we got our start in 2018.
Now, Ricky, you're an engineer by day, and arguably a YouTuber and influencer at night. So talk to me a little bit about your background, your interest in general in renewable energy and electric vehicles, energy storage, and a little bit about your YouTube channel, Bit Da Vinci, and what you focus on there.
Yeah, so I actually have a little bit of news for you on that front. I went to school for mechanical engineering. I went to Cal, and then after about 6 years of working in aerospace engineering, the iPhone comes out, and I was thinking, software is going to be a big thing. So after work, at night, on weekends, I just started learning software on by myself. And I've spent the last 10 years in software. I've been an iOS developer. The news is I'm actually going to be resigning. I currently work at Salesforce, which for anybody who's in tech, definitely look at Salesforce. I will argue that they are the best company in America, maybe the world, you can work for. They gave me 6 months off as a father for my second son, paid to spend time with my kids. I mean, it's the best company on earth. But that being said, there comes a time when we got to kind of pursue our own thing. Mo, you run your own company. You had this moment at some point in your past. You worked for somebody and then you made the switch. So for me, I think the time is nigh, and I've decided it'll be middle of June 2021. I'm going to go full time and be a YouTuber, which is I'm not sure how my mom feels about that, but
dude, amazing, man! Congratulations! I'm super excited for you. That leap of faith, man, it's everything. I always think about those early days when I initially took the leap, and the back and forth and the uncertainty. Obviously, I had a little less to lose than you did at that point, right? So this makes it all the more exciting that you have, kind of you're more established. You have an engineering degree. You have a family to support. You live in California, which isn't the most, affordable place in the country.
But the challenges are real. Big mortgage, everything is expensive here. Whatever you guys pay for like a gallon of gas, add $1.50 to it probably for us here. And that goes pretty much for everything. It's expensive. It is not the ideal place, but I bought a house here, so we're here, and we didn't want to keep waiting. At some point, like you said, leap of faith is exactly the right term. You got to just give it a shot. And what's the worst that could happen? I've got some runway, and if I'm not comfortable with how things are going, worst case scenario, I'd have to go brush up on software coding challenges and stuff and go interview around. So not the end of the world.
I'm sure you'll be just fine. So tell us a little bit about your YouTube channel. how it started, and how you've committed yourself. I mean, to the point where now you're going full time with it. That's pretty incredible, and sort of where this deep level of interest in regards to renewable energy, storage, technology, electric vehicles transpired, and how it's led you to have the outlook and the decision making, and even the product adoption that you've made to this day.
I've always found renewable energy like just wildly interesting. My college, like my final exam in college for my in engineering, we made, well, there were a couple of them, but one of them we made this solar panel array that would rotate and find the best optimal angle. I mean, you can buy that off the shelf now, but it was a fun project to code up with like little light sensors that would move until like, the highest rating was achieved, and you'd kind of sit there and tilt in 2 axes. So I've always been into it. And in 2011, 10 years ago, I actually bought my very first solar panel. So I bought 5 panels. I was very poor back then. I had just bought a house. The guy was like, oh yeah, I'd recommend 20 panels. I was like, no. First of all, I'm not going to do a loan or anything. Give me the cheapest package. And he was willing to come down to 5 panels, which is a 1.1 kilowatt system in 2011 for $10,000 before the rebates and stuff, which gives you an idea for anybody listening how far we've come. You can get triple. Mo will tell you exactly, but at least triple, if not quadruple, that system today for the same amount of money. So we've made huge strides in bringing costs down, of course. But for me, when I got those panels, I was living by myself. I was a bachelor, and I'm very stingy. Like, I don't run the air conditioning very much. I turn off all the lights all the time. It's kind of my my bracket. I'm Indian, and growing up, my parents were like, yeah, we try to save money whenever possible. So that was always kind of ingrained in me. So the guy comes to see my bills, and he says, honestly, I don't think I would even recommend solar for you because your bills are so low. Your recoup period would be many, many, many years. And I told him, actually, I don't really want to do it for the money savings. I'm just wildly interested in like viewing data and seeing the impact to my bill or how much energy I can produce in cloudy days. And I wanted data. And here's the crazy thing. I now have 10 years of real world solar data. And that was the whole point of it. And you could say that $10,000 investment probably is a big reason why our channel is where we are today. Because I make videos about my panels all the time. And those are the videos, they don't get the most views always, but people really resonate with it. And they always, I learned a lot. I learned about like ROI. So for example, my $10,000 in 2011, it took 8 years to recoup, which is longer than it is today, as Mo could tell you. But I did, they have paid themselves off, and guess what? They're up there just working. And I always tell people in that 10-year period, I've been through like 2 refrigerators and 4 cars. I've been married and had children. Like everything in my life has changed, except I still own the same house and I have the same solar panels.
Those are the only 2. Comes out and shines.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's incredible, man. So really the solar videos on YouTube are what really kickstarted the channel, would you say? Or were you already making videos about things?
No, it was the solar videos that kickstarted the channel, and they continue to be interestingly on YouTube. Typically, after a year or so, your views are going to drop down to like basically 0. But I have a video where I think the title is what you should know before going solar, and I made this in 2018. That video is still in the top 10 of views day by day, and it's wildly out of date. The numbers are all. I should make another video talking about it. Maybe I'll do that. But yeah. People are very curious, and it comes from either caring about the environment or our impact on the environment, or self-sustainability, right? Or saving money. So between those 4 buckets, like solar is for everybody. If you're like a hardcore conservative and you believe in self-reliance, solar panels. What better way than to be off the grid and not rely on anybody? If you're an environmentalist, if you're if you're financially motivated, like solar is one of those weird things that I think is at the intersection for everybody.
I couldn't agree more, Ricky. And I try to point that out to a lot of people who are just not aware, not educated, heard about a poor experience that someone might have had because of a bad buying decision. And it really bums me out. It bums me out because I believe that solar should be accessible to everybody. It should be, an educational process. and it should be customized to and tailored to your specific needs, right? But it's also the impact side that drew me to doing the same thing, and that's kind of why I can really relate to what you were talking about when you started, thinking about solar and the data. Right. I just want to collect some data. I want to be able to know what I'm generating from my roof, from the clean, energy of the sun and feeding my home, and how much it's saving, and how much of of an offset I'm having in terms of my carbon footprint. And it's the reason why in 2015, when I was starting my solar company, I also started with a solar system on my mom's house. And it was my very first system. And I really wanted to get her situated with solar first so I could look at the data and understand it, and also feel like I've adopted the technology. And it really did fascinate me in that same way. I want to switch gears a little bit, Ricky, and talk to you about EVs. So you're a big EV guy, right? You drive a Tesla,
Right.
to my understanding. You've been seeing all these announcements recently about the F-150. And if I'm not mistaken, you recently went and spent some time with the F-150. I want to get your thoughts around electric cars and the decade of electric cars that we're about to have, in general, just what you foresee happening with the electric car market. B, I want to look at what impact the electric vehicle market is going to have on the electric grid, right? And why more people aren't talking about the impacts and the potentially devastating, very dramatic impacts that electric vehicles could potentially have on the electric grid and on people's bills later down the road. And just kind of get from you a general sense of where you see electric vehicles going, in terms of adding additional functionality like power outages, like F1, the Ford released, and what Tesla is probably capable of doing but hasn't released yet to the public. So give me an idea around where you see electric cars at today and into the future, as well as their functionality and what potential impacts it can have on the grid.
Yeah, I think you brought up a couple of points there. Let's talk about the one you just made. I believe, Mo, the last time we talked, we were talking about solar glass roof, and I think the cold snap that had happened in Texas, leaving people without power, that had just happened, I believe, when we last chatted, like February, March. So I was invited to Ford's Michigan Proving Grounds, where we talked about the Ford F-150 Lightning. It was a super honor, because I thought it'd be like, hundreds of people. I would just be one of hundreds of people invited. Turned out, because of with COVID and everything else, I was one of two people, and I was one of the first two people to see this truck. So that was really cool. It was the first day, and they had like two people the next couple of days. Joe Biden came like a couple of days after that. So it was a really big honor, and it was one of those signs that told me, like, yeah, be brave and do this thing full time. Like, I think good things will happen. But the first 20 minutes or so of the Ford presentation, they didn't even talk about the car moving. The first 20 minutes were about how this truck can power your whole job site, how this truck can power your entire house if the power goes down. And I think what's really smart with what Ford has done is, for a lot of people, if I have a gas truck and it works fine today, sure, the EV, I don't have to do oil changes, and maybe the charging is a little bit cheaper, but those costs they're not killing me today anyway. Why should I care about making this conversion? Well, here's why. How about this? How about you plug in your car at night, and if the power goes out, you wouldn't even know. You would wake up, and it was like your neighbors all said, "Oh, the power was out for 4 hours last night. All our food went bad," and you'd say, "Oh, I had no idea, because nothing happened in my house." Right? It's a wildly powerful thing. And again, in the interest of like self-reliance and independence, which I think are values that a lot of truck drivers, to my mind anyway, probably put a lot of emphasis on. And for them to know that you could be at home and the power could go out and you could still run your family with a huge back like that truck will have for days at a time. And you couple that with solar, potentially you could just live off the grid and not even bother. So that was a clear focus for Ford, this idea of vehicle to home, or maybe even eventually vehicle to grid, and for good reason, because that I think is one of the unsung benefits of electric vehicles. I've said this on my show all the time. I'm a big fan of Tesla, but I really dislike their stance on not supporting vehicle to home. I think the reasons why they do it are financial. They'd rather you buy an electric car and then go, spend a lot of money on a Powerwall. Why eat into both of those? Because if you do support vehicle to home, now you're having battery charge and discharge cycles that aren't putting miles on the truck or the car. So your warranty numbers might go up, right? Because like now I'm saying, hey, my battery degraded and it only has 40,000 miles. Well, yeah, but you've been charging and discharging it to the grid or to the house every day for years and barely driving it. So there's some challenges I think these companies have to figure out in terms of like how to maybe have a correlation of charge cycles to miles converted. So you can kind of say, look, if you keep charging and discharging your house like this, here's what that kind of translates to. Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing is there's some challenges there. And I think Ford has the right of it. A lot of these companies coming out, Lucid has said they'll support this. And I think Rivian. So supporting vehicle to home should be top of mind for people because it brings security. People's lives, if Tesla supported this, they could have saved lives in Texas, to my mind. So really important. Tesla could support this in the future. They are the leaders in this space, so they could do that. To your point about the grid and overloading the grid, what's really fascinating to be honest, I feel like being a grid manager is an impossible job. I have no idea how they do it. Right? I sit here and I turn on a electric kettle and I need 1,000 watts of energy right now, and it has to be available somewhere. And I didn't need it yesterday. I need it today. I mean, they have to predict and forecast and model all of this. Incredibly difficult jobs because everything about electricity today is just in time. Like we don't have any kind of real storage, which is what you want. You want a buffer because, like, let's say if you ran your house with solar without a battery, the clouds come overhead, the solar generation plummets, and then what? All your computers shut off and you lose all your data. No, you need a buffer. You need to be able to go into a battery bank and run on the battery until the sun comes back out again 15 minutes later, and then there's so much extra energy that you can recharge the battery. That buffer is what you need. So, to my mind, what these cars, electric vehicles can do is whenever you're not using it, just leave it plugged in, and in a future where the grid is smarter, what I kind of call grid 2.0, where we have virtual power plants and we have kind of code set up to say, hey, there's a huge demand right now. Who can give me power? And my Ford F-150 or my Tesla Cybertruck or Model 3, in my garage goes, Ricky's not driving, he's working. Sure, I can give power and send out power to the grid. And the grid can say, look, I buy power. I don't care where I buy it from because the grid doesn't produce power. They're the middleman. They're the distribution channel. So whether they buy their power from a power plant or from a guy's battery pack in his car, they don't care. And so imagine that you could just leave your EV plugged in and you could be making money by dealing with this. It's like selling when prices are really high and demand is really high, and then buying it back when it's low, meaning there's excess energy. And so you could be this kind of broker and maybe you could make money each month. The future is going to be interesting, right?
Yeah, absolutely. On that note, I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are around stationary storage and what will happen to, power wall systems and, end-phase end charge or other standalone battery systems. As people look at electric cars, they're going to say, okay, well, why should I buy stationary storage if I, have this big old battery, right, in my car that can provide power to to the home in the event of an extended power loss? And for me, like personally, what I think is, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, I think stationary storage still has a role in a functionality around constant cycling, right? Capturing excess credits so that you can discharge when you need them. And it fits within the rate design of whatever utility provider you have. And it doesn't seem to me, although I don't have many details on how these, electric vehicle to grid or vehicle to home, technology will work. I don't feel like these trucks or other vehicles will be able to handle a constant cycling, right? On, off. And maybe they can, I don't know, right? But I feel like that's where stationary storage might still have a role to play in the future. And I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, so add a little more context. You're 100% right. I think the answer is going to be stationary power. The car should probably be thought of as like a backup or a last case kind of a thing. I don't think you want your car to be your main home battery, because the minute you go to run an errand, there goes your battery, right? So yeah, I think the future really is stationary. And the other reason why is I think chemistries, the chemical formulation for these lithium-ion batteries are going to increasingly target performance, like the most energy dense formulations possible, which are not the batteries you want for stationary storage. So for stationary storage, you can easily use like lithium iron phosphate, which is not as energy dense as the batteries in like these cars, because, well, you don't want to carry around extra weight for no reason in a car. But for a stationary storage pack, no problem. Plus, lithium iron phosphate batteries of today can easily last 4,000 or 5,000 charge cycles, which would be years and years of operation. Right? So that's the kind of stuff that you want, right? So 3,000 cycles would be 10 years. Do the math from there. Right? Very good life cycles. So yeah, the future is absolutely going to be stationary. But imagine for some people who can't afford to have that, imagine if your next vehicle purchase was an EV and you had that emergency preparedness, peace of mind, knowing you could power your house if the power did go out.
Like you said, it'll definitely save lives, and it could have saved lives during Snowmageddon and Texas tundra. But yeah, absolutely, I agree. So as far as going back to my earlier question, the future of EVs, what do you see from the EV market in the next 5 years? Lucid, Rivian, Tesla, obviously, GM, Hummer, Ford. So the list goes on and on. What do you think will be some of the leading innovations? Who do you think will come out on top? And one of the deeper questions I have is in regards to the EV charging infrastructure and network, and some of the reports coming out saying, the US needs to get this right? Because if we don't get this right, it could get jacked up for, decades to come. So I'm curious to know your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the key is going to be very simply battery cell supply. So every one of these companies, like Ford, let's say there was like 1 million reservations for this truck and they could make money on them, and like they'd be happy to do that. The reason what I think keeps Ford up at night is what they used to make with the F-150, the gas truck. They didn't have any dependencies. They could just go to work as long as, there's chip shortages and other things like that. But by and large, if all the componentry that is required to build the truck was there, they could pump these trucks out. Now, you are waiting on that battery supply. And if SK Innovations, which is going to be their supplier for the F-150, says, oh, actually, we're at a bit of an impasse because we have the Hummer to supply, so we can't give you any more batteries. So you're not taking a company that used to be completely independent and free to do their own business to now be like relegated to being, at the whim and mercy of this battery supplier. And global battery supply will be the challenge. So Rivian and Lucid, they're all going to back up against this because all those companies are going to make as many cars as they can. But if there's not a battery in it, you can't sell it, right? Unlike the gas car, no gas car manufacturer worries about oil production. You just build it with a big empty gas tank and you let it fly. But with the battery, you have to build it with all the chemistry you'll ever need on day one. So that is the challenge I think a lot of companies are backed up against, and why they're not pursuing this more aggressively. The problem with that is a little bit of the chicken and the egg, because Tesla they're building their own factories to make their own batteries. So their lead is going to increasingly grow. Whereas if you're Ford and you're going to sit back and wait for LG and SK Innovations and Samsung SDI, all these companies to increase their supply, you're always going to be, the problem with that is, I think when the battery cell supply increases, the number of manufacturers and startups, people building cars will increase. You'll never get ahead of that problem. Unless you're willing to buy them at a premium, which you don't want to do that because then your car is not going to be competitive. So battery supply. If we could figure out formulations with less, controversial materials like cobalt, if we could, figure out ways to make more renewable or recyclable batteries, which is going to be a big deal 5 or 10 years from now. I have a video coming out talking about that. But right now, it'll be the supply. That is the limitation. There's companies that want to build EVs, I think, but they're worried about this problem.
That is a very interesting perspective, very interesting point. I have not really thought that much about battery cell supply, although that makes a ton of sense because Ford has come out and hit their target, missed their targets, and all of these EV manufacturers are missing their targets, and they've all pointed to supply chain constraints in the microchip industries and so on, semiconductor shortages. So that is very interesting. What about the EV charging infrastructure network, Ricky? What do you see happening there? Tesla obviously has their supercharging network. There's the charge points, the Blinks of the world. Now Rivian announced that they're going to come out with their own. What do you foresee happening, and what are the problems that we could try to and avoid if we go about this and strategize and do the build out and the implementation the right way?
Yeah, great question. Just really quickly on the last point, a lot of these car companies rely on a methodology called just in time, meaning we're not going to go buy a year's supply of anything. We'll buy it like week by week so that we never have like excess inventory. Because if you have like a year's supply of something and the next version of it comes out, you're relegated to building a year of the old crap before you can move to the next thing. That's why like Apple and companies like this are very lean and just in time. So that will hurt you if you have a car fully assembled, but there's no battery pack, right? There's no cells because just in time, there's a shortage kind of a thing. And that would kill a company. You have all this capital investment in a car that's 95% done without a battery pack sitting there taking up space that could be used for building other things. Yeah, it'd be a nightmare. So that's the challenge. As far as charging networks go, I think the future is going to have a lot of players, and there's going to be standardization. Like nobody who drives a gas car goes, "Oh man, that's a Shell station. I really need to get to an Exxon Mobil station because my car is not compatible." No one says that. There's different people who make gasoline, and they have their own little concoctions and blends. But at the end of the day, every car can work at any station. That has to be the future. Tesla right now has an advantage, but that's going to quickly flip the other way. So if Tesla doesn't have a CCS adapter, and if I can't charge at the other people's charging stations, then Tesla is going to quickly become the underdog in this fight because, yeah, they're way far ahead now, but Tesla cannot compete with Electrify America and Blink and ChargePoint and EVgo, all the different networks and all the ones to come. So really what it comes down to is if you're ChargePoint or you're EVgo, you're Electrify America, your job is to build new stations. That way when people come and plug in there, you can make money on that. But whether they drive a VW or a Tesla or whatever the car might be, it should all just work. And that does pretty much hold true for like the Mach-E, the ID4, the F-150. These are all CCS, so they're standard. Tesla's kind of the outlier. And I think the future, there has to be standardization. Whether you pull up to a Tesla charger, Teslas are proprietary, and I guess they have the freedom to not open it up to other people. But I think everybody else probably just should allow anybody to charge. There's a back-end gateway set up, like you go on and make an account, you link your credit card payment and stuff, you put your car's identifier, and then the systems know, you just plug it in, the car knows, oh, yep, that's Mo's Tesla, charge them this way to the card. Everything's automatic and easy and touchless and everything. So I think the future is going to require some standardization because you don't want to have I can't go to this charge network because they're not in my network. You can't live like that. The EV will never thrive in that world because that's not how gas cars are. Use the gas car model and make the EV experience the same at least or better in every way. It can't be worse in any way because then who would give it up, right? Who would give up the gas car?
And I think that's what makes me super nervous is hearing these awful reports of people that went on road trips and had to carry like 50 different key cards around to be able to charge at different networks. And definitely not here to instill fear into any of our listeners about buying an EV and taking it on a road trip. But I do really, really pray and hope that they standardize the charging networks, that Rivian does, universal charging and doesn't make the same, mistake, arguably mistake that Tesla's made of making it super proprietary. I think they need to open it up and allow any EV to charge at any charging, station so that we can encourage more and more adoption of EVs and not create legitimate objections that result in people not adopting EVs quickly enough. Ricky, unfortunately, I have a very short time to spend with you today. And I know that we're going to be talking again soon, especially since congratulations, you're going to be going full time in doing this. I'm so thrilled, man. So happy for you.
Thank you.
To continue following your journey. We're definitely going to have a part 2 and hopefully a part 3 and onwards. So I always enjoy our discussions. We definitely need to hop on and chat about the increased pricing of Tesla solar roofs and everything going on
Yes.
from this perspective. But man, such an honor. So happy for you. I can't wait to continue following your journey. To all of our listeners, make sure you go follow Bit Da Vinci on YouTube. Ricky, pleasure, man, and look forward to chatting with you again soon.
Yeah, same goes to you, Mo. I appreciate you. Thank you for everything. And absolutely, when I'm full time, I'll have more time on my hands, and just let me know.
It's going to be a weekly occasion, hopefully. So
there you go.
Have a good one. And
cheers. Enjoy the conference. Let me know what you learned.
Thank you. I will, man. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Thinking Green with Mohammed Abdallah. This episode was brought to you by Good Faith Energy. For more information, check out goodfaitenergy.com. Make sure you subscribe, give us a review, and leave a 5-star rating. If you like this episode, share it with a friend. See you on the next episode of Thinking Green.